Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
I've come to Yap in Micronesia, famous for its huge stone money and its giant manta rays. Yap is a remote island in the Pacific, about halfway between Japan and Australia. Divers travel here from all over the world to see an amazing and huge animal. I'm talking about manta rays, the largest rays in the world, and they should be right under the boat. Let's go take a look. As I drop into the water, I notice that it's pretty murky. I'm diving in a channel through the fringing reef between the open ocean and the land. As the tide changes, water flows in and out of this channel. The current is moving me along rapidly, and I ride it like a river, following my guide John to a section of reef where we hope to find mantas. I tuck into a position at the base of a coral head, out of the current, and wait. The swift current blows the coral polyps like wind and sweeps along pieces of eelgrass and mangrove leaves from the lagoon. I wait a long time. It takes nearly an hour, but finally a shape emerges from the murky distance. I would recognize that shape anywhere, the beautiful and graceful motion of a manta ray, soaring like a huge bird through the water. It stops over the coral. A dozen or so tiny fish converge on the ray while it hovers just over their home. The fish are cleaner wrasses. They pluck parasites from the rays, and this coral head is known as a cleaning station. It's a great symbiotic relationship because both the fish and the rays benefit from it. The fish get a meal of tasty parasites like copepods and scraps of dead skin, while the manta ray gets rid of parasitic annoyances that can cause infection. Cleaning is not always a pleasant experience, though. Sometimes one of the cleaner fish nibbles a little too hard, and the manta jumps away. At the end of my dive, I do a short decompression stop for safety, then head up. That was incredible! The current was really strong. It was blowing me back. I could barely hold on. The manta ray was just lying gently into the current, holding his position over the cleaning station. Really incredible to see. It's no coincidence that the mantas like a little bit of current while they're being cleaned. Mantas, like all rays and sharks, have no swim bladder. A bony fish can hover in mid-water perfectly still because it has a swim bladder to control its buoyancy. Sharks and rays sink if they stop swimming. The enormous wings of the manta, reaching 25 feet across, allow them to fly through the water like a bird. And like a bird, if they stop flapping, they'll begin to glide towards the bottom. The mantas come to the cleaning station at a particular time, but it has nothing to do with the time of day. Like a runner on a treadmill, the mantas require just the right amount of water movement so they can swim in place to be cleaned by the fish. They follow the timing of the tides, preferring to be cleaned just before or after slack tide when the water is moving, but not too fast. This manta is holding its mouth wide open so the cleaners can go inside. As long as we don't get too close, the mantas are not bothered by our cameras and bubbles at all. There are only a few prime cleaning stations, and they have become social stops as much as hygienic visits. Often there are a dozen or more manta rays at the cleaning station, all taking turns being cleaned and interacting with each other while waiting.
Each manta ray has a unique pattern of spots on its belly, which can be used like a fingerprint to identify individual animals. Here at Yap Divers, they've been documenting and photographing these spot patterns for many years, and they've identified more than 60 individual manta rays and given them nicknames. This morning, I got to meet Zorro.
Zorro has 3 little spots and a pair of stripes between her gills. Underwater, she's easy to identify. The 3 spots and the stripes. Being able to identify individuals has proved that the mantas around Yap stay here for long periods of time. They're not just passing through, they live here, and the divers see the same ones over and over and over. Yap has more to see than just mantas, though. I cruise over to the other side of the island to explore the outer reefs. There I see magnificent coral and crystal clear water far away from the murky water in the channel. I swim with a big school of barracudas. When I get too close, I spook them. I watch a sea turtle munching on a sponge. And I swim in magnificent coral caverns, tunnels that snake between the coral heads and make me feel like I'm exploring another planet. Yet at the end of my dive, as I emerge from the cavern, I see another manta ray flying over, far from the cleaning station. It's almost as if this single manta has come to bid me farewell. It's a magical and fitting end to an astonishing journey. On most of my dive expeditions, I'm just going down to observe, but today I'm on a rescue mission. I'm going to rescue some juvenile fish. This might be hard to believe, but if I don't go get them, they will surely die. You see, every year, millions of tropical fish eggs from the Caribbean get caught in the Gulf Stream and take a ride up north where they hatch and grow for several months.
And a lot of these juvenile fish end up here off the coast of Rhode Island, a long way from home, more than 1,000 miles from the Caribbean. The problem is that when winter comes and this water gets cold, they'll die.
Even if we don't have our tank.
So every year, the New England Aquarium Dive Club organizes a tropical fish rescue. People come from miles around to try their hand at collecting tropical fish for the New England Aquarium exhibits. So I've come down to give it a try, but I'm a little concerned because I've photographed a lot of fish, but I've never caught fish. I don't really know how to do it, and I'm concerned about actually hurting the fish. So I'm here with Michael Shrubin, who's an expert in collecting tropical fish, and he's going to help me out. Now, Michael, can you tell me, is this hard? I mean, what do I need to know?
It's not hard. The biggest thing is to be calm. I've got all the tools, and I know where the fish are. I can show you how to do it.
All right, let's go.
All right.
All right, Michael, so show me this gear you have here. It's kind of interesting.
Well, it's funny. It's the various evolutions of catching tropicals. This is what I started out with, which is a soda bottle with the end cut off of it. And if this were a rock, you put the soda bottle down, and you just use your hand and get the fish in, and you can see what kind of fish he is. This is the way I normally catch fish and have been for a long time. And what it is, it's a net, and the trick is this is the container that everything ends up in that I want, and it always keeps water going through it. There are holes in there, a valve to keep the fish from going back out, and if I don't want it, I can cap it off and let that animal out, the valve.
So, we put on our suits, check our gear, and head into the water. The fish are small and they hide in the rocks in very shallow water, so Michael inches along looking closely at the bottom in search of them. Then his eye catches a juvenile butterfly fish, a baby tropical fish that looks out of place in New England. I watch as Michael easily catches the fish in his net. Does the fish have any idea of its fate as it descends through Michael's apparatus? Who knows, but one thing is certain, this little fish will die if we don't rescue it. Now it's my turn. I grab my net and start looking. Then I see what looks like a pea with a face bobbing in the water. It's a juvenile boxfish. I coax it into my net. This fish is so tiny, I'm afraid of hurting it, so as you can imagine, I'm very gentle. I slowly work the fish all the way down to my bottle. While we're looking for more fish to rescue, I'm startled to see a fully grown seahorse battered by the strong surge. I thought seahorses were exclusively tropical fish, but Michael says no.
I don't believe he is. A lot of people believe that he belongs in our water and can live in our cold water all the way up to Nova Scotia. It's something that most people never ever see and wouldn't believe that you could see in the North Atlantic.
Just to be sure, we decide to rescue him and check which species he is. He clings to the algae with his tail, and I have to coax him into the bottle with my hand. I could easily hurt him, so I'm super careful. To try and make him more comfortable, I bring some of the algae he likes into the bottle. He seems too large to be a juvenile, so I'm betting he's a full-time resident of these northern waters. After the dive, we check out the fish we rescued. Michael keeps them alive in a small aquarium until they reach their final home at the New England Aquarium. They will start out in a smaller tank, but as they grow, these fish will eventually end up in the 200,000-gallon giant ocean tank, the main attraction at the New England Aquarium. These three amigos will be on their way to the New England Aquarium within hours. The seahorse, as it turns out, is a local, so we'll let him go. It's been a long and perilous journey from the Caribbean, but thanks to the many volunteers, these fish have been spared a certain death from the cold winter water here in New England. Turns out these guys will survive their ordeal and probably even thrive in their new homes.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to go eye to eye with a really big tiger shark.
The tiger shark, one of the world's most feared and dangerous sharks. It patrols the shallows of tropical oceans looking for a meal.
But what would it be like to dive with a tiger shark? How would it react to a diver? I'm going to investigate tiger sharks. I'm going to do it without a cage.
My adventure begins when I board the Dolphin Dream in West Palm Beach, Florida. This boat will be my home away from home for a week. We begin our journey by crossing the Gulf Stream on a course to the Bahamas. It's an 8-hour journey across some very rough water.
It's 55 miles of the open Atlantic Ocean between Florida and the Bahamas, and it can get pretty rough out here.
Captain Andy drives the boat through the swells all day to reach West End, Grand Bahama, where we go through customs and then continue to a secret spot called Tiger Wreck. We anchor the boat securely. We will sit here for the whole week looking for sharks. Next, we begin chumming. The boat's freezers are full of bait because we need a lot of fish to bring tiger sharks to the boat. Within only an hour, sharks start coming to the boat.
I wouldn't want to arm wrestle.
6, 7, 8.
This is incredible. We've only been chumming for about an hour, and there's already more than 20 lemon sharks around the back of the boat. And I gotta go in.
Now it's time to suit up and get into the water.
I'm wearing a black wetsuit, black gloves, and even a black hood, because underwater, skin looks like fish. And the last thing that I want is for the sharks to think my hands are pieces of fish they can eat. So I have to go to this length to make sure that I have no skin showing. I guess this is the part where I have to go in the water. Oh well, this is what I came here for. Geronimo.
I grab my camera and head down to the sandy bottom, only 20 feet below. Lemon sharks are everywhere. You can tell that these are lemon sharks by their two dorsal fins, which are nearly the same size. You might be wondering why they call them lemon sharks. I mean, they don't really look like lemons.
They call them lemon sharks actually because they have yellowy skin, and it really has nothing to do with lemons.
There are also many fish around the boat that are attracted to the chum. With so many sharks and fish around, the sharks even get a few live ones. Although there are no tiger sharks, I have a fantastic dive full of excitement. I head back to the surface for a rest.
Whoa! That's a lot of sharks! Wow! I think that's the most sharks I've ever been in with at the same time. and the ladder is probably not a great place to hang out. Woo-hoo-hoo. Whoa, that was incredible. I can only imagine what it's gonna be like when the tiger shark shows up. Woo!
We will continue chumming and hope the tigers pick up the scent. Meanwhile, the lemon sharks just keep coming, and the water around the boat is starting to look downright frightening. Later, after sunset, I start suiting up again.
Tiger sharks are nocturnal, which means they're more active at night. So it makes sense that if I want to find tiger sharks, I should go diving at night. There's really only one small problem with that. It's dark. Oh well. Here goes.
I descend towards the bottom and switch on my video lights. On the ocean floor, Gorgonian sea fans sway in the current. Then, out of the darkness comes a shark. It's not a tiger, it's another lemon shark, but it still provides a thrill as it swims by and takes a look at my camera. The lemons seem just as active at night as they are during the day. I wonder if they ever rest. They find my video lights worthy of inspection. After an hour underwater in the dark, I surface without finding a tiger shark. I guess we just need to chum and wait. Tiger sharks can be elusive.
Whoa! That was amazing! I have to tell you, no tiger sharks, but the lemons are pretty spooky at night.
The next day, I head back to the bottom once again. There are still plenty of lemon sharks around. But then, a shape in the distance catches my eye. It's a tiger shark! At last, a tiger shark has appeared. It takes her a while to get comfortable with divers in the water, but eventually she approaches closer to investigate me. She comes up and makes a few passes by the bait, cautiously keeping an eye on me. For such large animals, tiger sharks seem a lot less aggressive than you might expect. It's as if they carefully consider each step, trying to decide if it's safe. Finally, she comes right up to a huge piece of bait and takes it away in one bite. The shark is also interested in the chunks of fish that have fallen to the sand. As the sharks go by, I take the opportunity to compare the two species. There are several differences between the tiger shark and the lemon sharks. Besides the different type of dorsal fins, the tiger shark also has a broader, flatter head and the distinctive tiger stripes for which they're named. The sharks seem interested in my video lights. Even though they're not being used during the day, the white housing of the lights probably looks like a piece of fish to the sharks, and they often come up to closely investigate them. Occasionally, a shark takes a test bite out of the light, and if I don't see it coming, it takes me by surprise. I'm not prepared for a large tiger shark to come in after my video light, though. She keeps coming closer and closer. Then, as she tries to bite it, and I try to keep it away from her, we spin around on the sandy bottom like two dancers. She eventually pushes me into the bottom and gets a hold of my light. There's nothing I can do about it except use my camera as a shield and hope she doesn't eat the whole thing. When she's satisfied that the light isn't food, she turns and swims off, and I'm glad she does. That was a little bit too close for comfort, and that's the reason we wear dark clothing and gloves when we dive with sharks. If that had been my hand, I would be in serious trouble right now. I head to the surface, impressed by the strength of the large tiger shark, and ready to escape the sea for a while. I've enjoyed many adventures in the ocean and many exciting encounters with sharks, but this one will stick with me for a long time.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
You might not think of sea stars as being very intelligent, and you'd be right. But you might be impressed by some of the amazing things they can do, especially considering they don't have a brain.
Starfish, more correctly called sea stars, live just about everywhere in the ocean, from the tropics to Antarctica and everywhere in between. They come in all shapes and sizes, from fat and stubby to long and skinny. This brittle star walks with a coordinated effort using its rays like legs. But most sea stars get around using hundreds or thousands of tiny tube feet on their underside. This is a northern sea star living in the coastal waters of New England, and it's a predator. It's hunting a scallop. It's a drama played out in slow motion as the sea star moves in for a grip on the scallop's shell. But the scallop is not defenseless. With a mighty blast of water, the scallop jets away to safety. So the sea star wraps itself around a mussel. Mussels are attached to the bottom and can't get away. The sea star uses its strong tube feet with suction cups to pull the mussel open a tiny bit and digests its victim by injecting its stomach inside the mussel. Picking up the sea star, I can see that it has the mussel firmly in its grip. But not all sea stars feed on mussels and scallops. A basket star feeds on plankton in the water. It has finely branched arms that act like a net to catch the tiny bits of food floating by. It positions itself to be able to grab as much plankton as possible in the current.
Some sea stars eat something even more surprising. Come take a look.
Exploring a reef in the tropical Pacific, I find a crown-of-thorns sea star dining on the coral. This thorny, armored sea star is one of only a few animals that can digest living coral. It wraps itself around a coral colony and eats the polyps, leaving a dead, bleached coral skeleton behind. Here's a healthy colony of plate coral. And here's one that's been eaten by a crown of thorns. Outbreaks of these sea stars have been known to kill entire reefs. Carefully picking one up to avoid the sharp and venomous spines, I can see the stomach which the sea star inverts out of its mouth to digest the coral outside of its body. These sea stars are the second largest in the world, growing bigger than a dinner plate. But if you think these are big, wait until you see the largest sea star in the world.
To find it, I've come all the way to British Columbia. I'm looking for the giant Pacific Sun Star, and you won't believe the size of this thing.
In the cold, murky waters of the Canadian North Pacific, I swim through beautiful gardens of sponges, anemones, and soft coral, searching for a giant sun star. And then, down on the bottom, I find what I'm looking for. It has up to 24 arms, more properly called rays, and reaches 3 feet across. This is the world's largest sea star. Compared to most sea stars, the giant sun star is a speed demon, cruising along the bottom in search of its favorite food, other sea stars, and the occasional sea cucumber. Here, a sea cucumber makes an emergency retreat to escape this hungry sun star on the move. A 1,000 miles south on a reef in the tropics, I find a blue Lynchia sea star on the bottom. Like the vast majority of sea stars, this one has only 5 rays. With tiny tube feet on its underside, this sea star barely seems to move, but when I speed things up with time-lapse photography, Lynchia sea stars appear very active, moving about and grazing the bottom for food. But even more curiously, they're polite, restraining from walking on top of each other. Like bumper cars, when one Lynchia touches another, they each go the other direction. It's all very civilized. In an hour, a Lynchia on the move can travel several car lengths. Sea stars are amazing animals. They might look like they're just sitting there doing nothing, but they survive by hunting for food, and they do that in many ways, from catching it as it floats by to chasing it down. They're such good predators that sometimes they can destroy entire reefs. It goes to prove that just because something is slow doesn't mean it isn't up to something. You never know where a sea star is going to turn up. Underwater photography is a fantastic job. Although I enjoy diving all over the world, I have to admit that exploring coral reefs in clear water is the most relaxing and peaceful part of my job. There are all kinds of wonderful animals to meet on coral reefs, such as a pointy lionfish, or a curious octopus looking me in the eye. I never get tired of watching anemone fish, though. Outside of the world of diving, very few people had heard of anemone fish until Disney and Pixar came along.
In the film Finding Nemo, an anemone fish plays the starring role. In real life, these little fish are a lot different from their Hollywood portrayal. I mean, other than the fact that they don't actually talk. But you may find these colorful little fish quite surprising. Join me on a dive to meet some real anemone fish.
Anemone fish are found all over the tropical parts of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. They're quite common on coral reefs, so it won't take me too long to find one. Searching a reef on the Pacific island of Yap, I soon come across a pair of orange fin anemone fish, frolicking in an anemone that looks like a shag carpet. They're not afraid of me at all. I can swim right up and look them in the eye. There are 28 different species of anemone fish, all of which are very colorful, but the clown anemone fish, sometimes called the clownfish, is probably the most beautiful. This is the species that was the basis for the character in Finding Nemo. Anemone fish get their name because they live in a toxic anemone. This lush carpet has venomous tentacles that sting most fish. But the anemone fish is covered in a special slimy mucus that keeps the anemone from stinging it. Because of this adaptation, the anemone fish can live protected by the anemone, happily playing in the very tentacles that would kill other fish. Anemone fish are not the only animals that can live in the anemone. Cleaner shrimps hide here as well. They eat by cleaning the parasites from the fish, and in exchange for their services, the fish graciously don't eat the shrimp. But it's hard to relax when you're battered around by hyperactive anemone fish all day long. The protection afforded by the anemone is the reason why the anemone fish aren't afraid of me. They know that the anemone's stinging tentacles keep them safe. If another fish, like this damselfish, comes near the anemone fish become territorial and chase it away. They protect their anemone just as much as the anemone protects them, so it's a good relationship. And if a fish gets too close, the anemone gets a meal, using its venomous tentacles to sting and disable the fish. This fish is lunch. The anemone might look like some kind of weird plant, but it's actually a simple animal with a mouth in the middle. It's basically a jellyfish that can't swim. The anemone is a formidable ally to the anemone fish in more ways than one. They use the protection of the anemone to keep their eggs safe, too. The female anemone fish deposits her eggs on the reef under the edge of the anemone. Then her subservient males take over. The males provide all the egg care. The female just sits back and watches. In any group of anemone fish, there's always one anemone fish which is the largest. This is the dominant female. In anemone fish society, the females are the boss.
One of the most interesting things about anemone fish is that they're all born male, but as they mature, some will completely transform into females.
Only when the dominant female dies will the next male in line get the chance to transform into a female and become the head honcho. Until then, all the smaller anemone fish in the anemone are subservient males. Truth is stranger than fiction, as it turns out, and as my dive comes to an end, I realize that anemone fish are even more fascinating than Hollywood would have us believe. The animals of the ocean truly are remarkable.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to go into the water with 30 hungry gray reef sharks.
Many people seem to think of sharks as killing machines that go crazy if a single drop of blood touches the water. Gray reef sharks are one of the most aggressive sharks in the world, and they travel in schools of dozens of animals. When I dive into the water with these sharks, the splash gets their attention, and they come over for a look. They quickly size me up and realize that I don't look like food. Scuba divers not only don't look like fish, but don't act like them either. The sharks soon get bored and move on.
But what would happen if there was blood in the water? Will the sharks have a feeding frenzy? Will they attack everything in sight?
To find out, I've traveled to Yap, an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where large numbers of gray reef sharks patrol the reefs. The water is crystal clear, an ideal place to perform an experiment with sharks. I can keep my eye on them from a long way away. The experiment begins with some leftover fish that we will use as bait. I place this bait into a plastic crate so it will create a scent in the water, but the sharks won't be able to reach it.
Go find some sharks.
Soon, Captain John and I depart from the dock and make our way across the lagoon to the outer reef, home of the gray reef sharks. On site, I lower the ladder and we discuss our experiment.
So, John, you and I are gonna be down on the bottom. We're gonna go in first, right? And we're gonna wait for Mike to put the bait in. Is that the plan?
Yeah.
I'm working with two experienced Yapese divers who are going to help with my experiment to find out if sharks will form a feeding frenzy if we put a lot of bait into the water.
Can I see this on the surface? What?
First, we prepare our dive gear. And I get suited up. Next, John rolls into the water. He heads to the bottom and attaches a rope to a dead section of reef where we won't hurt the coral with the crate full of bait. Now it's my turn to go into the water.
Here you go.
Mike throws the bait into the water with the rope attached, and I follow it down. The fish are the first to figure out what's going on. They feed on the little scraps coming out of the crate as it makes its way to the bottom. John is pulling it down by the rope, so he doesn't need to swim with the crate among the sharks that are lurking. Once it hits the bottom, I move the crate to a hole in the reef with John's help. The first part of my experiment is to see if the sharks will find the bait if they don't actually see it. It only takes about 5 seconds for the sharks to find the bait hidden in the reef. More than 30 sharks surround me as they take turns swimming under to investigate the source of the smell. If there's one thing that sharks can do very well, it's smell things. And they smell dinner for sure. The sharks can't get to the fish where it's hidden, so I move it out into the open. I leave the wire cover on. Surely this will drive the sharks crazy and they'll start attacking the crate. Well, not really. The sharks seem to know that they can't get at the fish, so they just keep circling. One bumps my camera, probably an accident because I'm too close to the bait. Well, if that doesn't drive the sharks into a bloodthirsty feeding frenzy, maybe removing the top of the crate will produce the expected result. I open the top and stand back. Now the sharks are free to feed all they like. It doesn't take long for the sharks to figure out that something has changed. I can see their excitement level increase. They're swimming a little faster and investigating the crate more, but they still aren't going into a feeding frenzy. They look pretty civilized to me. Finally, one shark makes a bold move and sticks her head right into the crate for a tasty piece of fish. Once all the other sharks see that, they start rushing in for their own bite. Now the sharks are getting really excited. They all want to get a piece of fish before it's all gone. But this certainly doesn't look like a feeding frenzy to me. The sharks are pushing and shoving each other a bit, but they aren't biting each other, and they haven't paid me any attention at all, even though my camera is stuck practically right next to the crate full of fish. In all of the excitement, one of the sharks grabs one of the tripod legs on my camera. Watch it again from another angle. I'm definitely glad that is just a piece of plastic and not my arm. But to be fair, I have the camera practically inside the crate, so the sharks are grabbing anything that looks biteable in their competition to feed. After all the bait is gone, the sharks return to normal almost instantly. They go back to slowly patrolling the reef and pretty much ignore me. As my tank gets low on air, I swim out into the blue to get a few last shots before I head up to shallower water to decompress below the boat.
That was incredible. So many sharks. Gray reef sharks, silver tips, black tips, and yet I still have all my limbs. Who can explain it? Well, you know, it just goes to show you, sharks are not bloodthirsty killers. They're just fish.
Later, on my second dive at the same site, we search the reef for souvenirs. As the sharks feed, they often lose teeth in the process. Sharks have a never-ending supply of new teeth, so when they lose a few, it's not a big deal. I find a few in the cracks below the spot where the crate was sitting.
And here they are. They're pretty small. They don't look like much, but they sure are sharp.
So, I tried to make a feeding frenzy, and it didn't work. I didn't get eaten alive, and the sharks actually seemed very much in control. I proved something important.
Sharks are not stupid. They eat fish, and they have a pretty good idea what a fish looks like. Divers are just not on the menu. Because of this, shark diving has become a safe and popular activity where people can get up close and personal to these amazing predators.
All over the world, tens of thousands of divers go diving with sharks every year. It's exceptionally rare for anyone to be bitten. Most people find the experience not just exciting, but interesting. Sharks are beautiful animals and perhaps nature's most evolved predators. Yet we can watch them from very close range without being attacked. You would not be able to get this close to lions or bears without being in great danger. It's just another incredible thing that can only happen in the ocean, and another reason I love the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
The American lobster may not look all that tasty, but this large crustacean that was once considered a nuisance bycatch is now considered a delicacy around the world. Although they're shipped to restaurants everywhere, they come from the cold waters of the North Atlantic, mostly from New England and eastern Canada.
I want to find a really big lobster, so I've come to Eastport, Maine, right on the Canadian border, to hunt for a monster.
Lobsters hunt at night, so they like to hide in holes in the rocks during the day. This is what you normally see of a lobster during the day, just a couple of claws sticking out of its den. With some gentle prodding, the lobster will come out to defend its turf. Lobsters are extremely territorial and often fight each other for prime dens. I have to be very careful of the claws. If this lobster gets a hold of my hand or fingers, it can easily break them. This lobster has a larger claw on the left side. This is called the crusher claw. The other claw is the pincher or ripping claw. The crusher claw tells us that this lobster is left-handed, clawed. When a lobster gets this big, it demands respect. Maine is the lobster capital of the U.S., and Booth Bay Harbor is one of the most popular places to visit if you want a fresh lobster dinner. It's also the home of the Maine State Aquarium, where I'm learning a little bit about the life cycle of lobsters. I'm venturing behind the scenes in the Bigelow Laboratory, where they conduct research on lobsters. Researcher Amy Hayden Rodriguez introduces me to some of the unusual lobsters in their collection.
Now, most lobsters are not red. That's the color they are when they're cooked. In the wild, lobsters are more this color, sort of an olivey color, maybe with a little bit of green and some orange. Now, every once in a while, however, you'll come across a lobster that looks like this. This blue coloration is an extremely rare pigmentation found 1 in every 3 million lobsters. And I have to say, They are cool. Now, if you want to talk about rare genetic variations, this one takes the cake. This one is called a bicolor lobster, and you can see that the color is divided right down the middle. One side's blue, the other side's kind of a pale yellow. These bicolor lobsters are so rare, only 1 in every 100 million of these are born this color. That is one rare lobster. This female lobster has something very special going on. If you look underneath her tail, it's full of eggs. The female incubates thousands of eggs under her tail for up to a year before they hatch. And then when it's time for them to hatch, she releases the eggs out into the water. They hatch with little larvae that swim off into the water to become planktonic lobsters. Lobsters don't grow very quickly. And just to give you an example, this is about a 1-month-old lobster. Just old enough that it has settled down to the bottom after being plankton. But from this to the next phase takes a long time. This little guy, this little guy is between 1 year and 2 years old. It takes a long time for a lobster just to reach this size. And this is nowhere near market size yet. Incidentally, they pinch. Thank you. Now this one is just barely old enough to be a legal lobster for a lobsterman to catch. And it's probably 7 years old. So it takes 7 years just for a lobster to be big enough to catch. So you can imagine how long it takes those really big ones to get 3 feet long.
A few hundred years ago, lobsters were incredibly abundant.
In fact, after a big storm, the beaches would be covered in lobsters washed up by the waves.
Back then, lobsters were considered cheap food for poor people. How times change. Lobstermen catch lobsters using a simple trap, the design of which hasn't changed much in 100 years. The large round opening in this trap is where the lobster enters the trap. If they're undersized, they should be able to get out this little rectangular escape hatch. Down at the dock, I see the crew of the Catch-22 sorting their haul for the market. I go down with my camera to check it out. Lobsterman Todd Plummer and his crew have told me that I can go out with them to see what a day of lobstering is like. The sternman stuffs bait bags with herring as we cruise offshore to haul some traps. The coast of Maine is ruggedly beautiful, but the inshore areas are a labyrinth of lobster buoys, each connected to one or more traps. Finally, we arrive at one of the areas where Todd has set some of his 600 traps. Todd checks each trap for keepers, that is, lobsters that are legal size, and throws back the shorts and other bycatch like crabs. Because this is done by hand, none of the short lobsters or bycatch is harmed. His sternman bands the lobster claws so they can't attack each other in the hold. In the next trap, Todd finds a female lobster with a notch in her tail.
That's a V-notch right there. Let me see. Female, and you can see it's notched here. Right flipper. Let me just get a close-up of that.
The V-notch was put here by a fellow lobsterman so that everyone will know she's a good breeder and let her go. This is how lobstermen protect the future of the industry, by ensuring that there are always lots of egg-laying females out there.
So we're not allowed to keep that. See, it's built.
I want to see just what it looks like underwater when hauling traps.
Gotta love dry suits.
I don my dry suit for a dive off Todd's boat. This water is too cold for a wetsuit. At last, I enter the water and descend to the bottom. With the assistance of a winch from above, the heavy trap takes off into the gloom. At the surface, Todd checks for keepers and then sends it back down. Inside another trap, a lobster's trying to get out through the escape hatch, but he's too big. Many times, in fact most of the time, lobsters don't even go into a trap, but walk right on by. After filming a few wandering lobsters, I decide to head back up so Todd can get some work done. Lobstering is a tough business full of hard work and long days. Todd gives me a chance to try his job for a while.
All right, ready?
I get lucky by pulling up a female lobster with eggs.
Oh, yeah.
One with eggs in there.
This is going to be good.
And it needs to be notched.
And it needs to be notched. Oh, this is great. This is a great lesson right here. Okay, I got my measure. Got my measure. Let's find the first one. Oh, well, this is the first one. We just go right to the egg one.
Okay.
Now, this one has eggs, so maybe you can tell me what we do
What
with
you need to do with it is if it's female and has eggs, obviously it's female. You need to notch the tail legally.
All right, hold
Like
it.
this.
Okay, hold it.
Here.
Hold it. We got to get a shot of this. All right, carrying it in there.
Right in. Now you have a notch.
Okay.
Nobody will ever be able to take that lobster again.
Okay.
So that's for our future right there.
All right, so that's going to tell every other fisherman that this is a good egg-bearing female and leave her alone.
Right.
All right.
This is safe for life now.
Okay,
So,
I'm going to set her free. Okay, ready? Never to be eaten by people, but only to lay eggs. All right. Off she goes.
My time as an apprentice lobsterman taught me how hard these guys work for a living, and I also learned how efforts like V-notching have made lobstering one of the few fisheries that really makes an attempt to ensure the long-term viability of the species. American lobsters are one of the more interesting things to see on a dive in New England, and they're among the largest crustaceans in the world. They're fun to play with, and when they see their reflection in the camera lens, sometimes they can get pretty territorial. As interesting as they are, though, I still don't want to eat one. Everyone knows that I love sharks, and I've spent a lot of time watching them and filming them. You may have noticed that sharks very often have hitchhikers, a peculiar fish hanging on for a free ride. 24 hours a day, sharks often seem to be plagued by many of these freeloaders. Being a big, tough tiger shark doesn't make you immune to the attention of these fish. The bigger the shark, the bigger the freeloader. They're called Remoras, and they don't limit their attention to sharks. Any animal from the massive whale shark to dolphins, whales, and even sea turtles may have a remora or two attached. Although at first these fish may seem more like parasites, they actually perform an important function. The remora gets some of its meals by picking real parasites from its host. They actually help keep their host clean and healthy. Remoras also take advantage of a shark's messy eating habits, feeding on scraps which escape the shark's jaws. The remora attaches to its host using a strange-looking sucker on the top of its head. This is actually a modified dorsal fin, changed over millions of years of evolution to form a suction cup.
Got him! Here is a remora. On the top of its head, it has a suction cup. You can see all the way around the little flap of skin that allows it to form the suction cup to stick onto other fish. And on the suction cup, it has little ribs, and they're smooth in one direction and sandpapery rough in the other direction. This is actually their dorsal fin, which has evolved to become the suction cup. So this is the top. Even though it looks like it's upside down right now, that's the top of the remora. So this underneath is the belly. That's the belly. Now watch this. If I let it stick onto my hand, it'll grab on, and even when I'm out of the water, it can hold its own weight. So now we've done enough. I think we'll let this little guy go. I actually don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but we're gonna let it go. First, I'm gonna unstick. Here we go. Ready? Here we go. All right. Swim, be free!
Remoras may perform an important function for their host, but this is not to say that they don't bother them. I've traveled to the island of Yap to try a little experiment with sharks and remoras.
Right down below the boat is a school of gray reef sharks, and some of those sharks have remoras on them. We're gonna feed the sharks and get them really excited. And wait till you see what happens.
I drop down below the waves to join the sharks, which are already swarming around the reef looking for some hidden fish. The sharks get really excited when we start feeding them. As they bump against each other and compete for food, many of their remoras get knocked off. After the excitement dies down, these remoras find themselves homeless, swimming around without a host. Now they need to get back on a shark, but this is not as easy as you might think. This remora is stealthily approaching a shark, but notice how it's careful not to touch the shark. If the shark takes off before the remora sticks on, the remora can't keep up. Here's what happens when a shark can feel the remora. It turns away and the remora can't get a grip. This is how we know that the sharks don't really like the remoras. Given the chance, they'll take off before allowing a remora to attach. Maybe they tickle. Soon it tries again, this time with another shark. Getting a free ride is not as easy as it looks. I spend a few minutes filming the remoras. Fortunately, remoras don't find divers particularly attractive, so I don't need to worry about dodging them. Maybe it's because I don't have any parasites to clean. Maybe the scuba bubbles are too loud. As I end my dive and head up to the boat, I'm again amazed by the creatures of the ocean. I've seen remoras 1,000 times on dives all over the world and never given them much thought. It turns out that they have a fascinating life, and we've probably only just scratched the surface in learning about them.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to investigate a ton of friendly stingrays.
The stingray. It sounds like a weapon from outer space. It even looks a little like a spaceship, but actually it's a flattened fish with wings, a close relative to the shark. But stingrays are almost never dangerous to people because they spend most of their time on the bottom of the ocean hunting for clams and worms in the sand. Southern stingrays live all over the Caribbean.
And nowhere are they more common than here, Stingray City on Grand Cayman Island. This is one of the most famous marine animal encounters in the world.
The Cayman Islands are just to the south of Cuba in the Caribbean Sea. These islands are a diver's paradise with lush reefs and amazingly clear water. But it's not just divers who come here. Each day, dozens of cruise ships come to the Caymans loaded with tourists. Many of them come to interact with the stingrays, and that's why I've come here. My guide will be artist and marine biologist Dr. Guy Harvey, who operates a shop here on Grand Cayman Island. I stopped by to get a look at some of his famous paintings of marine life. Dr. Harvey takes a few minutes to show me his technique and his famous signature.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys doing today?
Great. How about you?
And then early the next morning, well before most ordinary tourists are awake, with Dr. Harvey and his daughter Jessica as my guides, I head out to Stingray City in hopes of observing hundreds of stingrays schooling in formation.
Well, Jonathan, hopefully there'll be nobody out there when we get there, and we can observe this phenomenon of the schooling stingrays, this is the only place in the world you'll see it happen.
Stingray City itself is a series of shallow sandbars on Grand Cayman's North Sound. When we arrive and drop anchor, there's nobody else here.
It's pretty deep.
I'm in the water for just a few minutes when, off in the distance, a squadron of stingrays comes right at me. We have the stingrays to ourselves for a while, but soon enough, other people start to show up. By mid-afternoon, hundreds of tourists have arrived to experience direct contact with the stingrays. The stingrays come here not for the contact with people, but for the never-ending buffet. The tourists, like all good guests, always bring something for lunch. A little fish or squid, for example. By feeding the stingrays, humans have actually altered their natural history here in the Caymans. Normally, they're nocturnal animals, feeding at night and resting during the day. But things are different at Stingray City, as Dr. Harvey explains.
By feeding them all day long, what we've done is change that. They go to sleep at night time because they don't need to forage, and they come here in the daytime. So the whole deal arrangement of behavior, feeding behavior, has been altered.
You could never do this with a truly wild stingray. These stingrays have been fed, and they're used to people, and they're not afraid. Normal stingrays, they take off, but these guys are looking for a little bit of a handout. So that's not really the only reason we can get this close to them. But still, the interesting thing is they are wild animals. They come to this place to be fed, but so do the animals that eat them. So they can become victims of shark bites, they can get hit by boats, cut up by propellers. So it's a pretty dangerous place still, even though it looks like it's just an aquarium. They don't call them stingrays for nothing. That's the stinger, or a barb. It's just a really sharp spine at the base of their tail, and it's their only means of defense. When they get attacked, it's the only thing they have is a little poker.
They use their stinger to protect themselves from their predators, sharks.
You know, for a big shark, this is like coming to Burger King.
And this is a perfect example because this male has lost his tail and half a clasper, probably to a shark. But he's doing all right. He's doing all right.
All right, we'll let him go.
The key to catching them, so I'm told by the experts here, is you got to get in front of them. But they keep turning on me. Okay, here we go. Here we go. There we go. Oh, turning. Here we go.
There you go.
There we go. No, don't turn. Don't turn. Don't turn. He just jumps right in there. It's like wrestling an alligator.
This is the big one. You ready? You ready?
Yeah. No, I gotta catch him myself.
Whoa! That is a big one.
Hello! That's a love bite. The most important part of this is to keep their head underwater because obviously they can't breathe if you lift it out of the water. Jessica has a good
example here for you. If you look on the stingray right behind the eye, there's a giant hole. You might think it's the gill, but it isn't. It's called a spiracle. And it's a little place where they can inhale water and then they pump it down into the sand through their mouths. And what they do is they use it like a jet. They blast little holes in the sand to hunt for prey.
Yep, so people won't tell.
Oh, no. There's a little piece of fish. We got going here. And it smells quite fishy. Here you go. Whoa, hey, yo, take it easy. There's a lot of inhalation going on that.
There's a lot to learn about stingrays, and Dr. Harvey leads a group of scientists who capture, measure, and tag the stingrays to learn about the impact of human interaction. They inject electronic chips into them so they can study them over many years. Since the tags go under the skin, they never fall off and they don't interfere with the stingray's natural behavior.
It works. We got 100% tag retention, which is really good for a long-term study on a population like this.
Dr. Harvey's research has shown that the same individual stingrays stay here year after year, and the bigger, more aggressive rays tend to get more food from people, so the smaller ones still have to do a lot of their own foraging. He also found that predators like sharks keep the population of stingrays under control. As for the human impact, it seems that both humans and stingrays enjoy the interaction. They both get something out of the deal. There is no doubt that Stingray City is special, a magical place where the creatures of the ocean and those of the land can meet and find common ground.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Antarctica, the frozen continent. Its hostile conditions and exotic marine life are legendary. For years, I've yearned to travel to the bottom of the earth to see this magnificent frozen world for myself, and finally, I've done it. Getting from the United States all the way to Antarctica at the bottom of the earth takes nearly a week, and it starts with a flight to Ushuaia, Argentina, at the tip of Tierra del Fuego. Often called the gateway to Antarctica, Ushuaia is a beautiful little coastal city in Patagonia at the base of a large mountain range. Many of the ships departing for Antarctica use Ushuaia as their port. Ushuaia is surrounded by a large national park. Rugged, craggy mountains tower above Ushuaia. They're beautiful, but of course, I'm more interested in the underwater scenery. So, I'm spending a day in Ushuaia to do a couple dives in the Beagle Channel. The Beagle Channel is a long, narrow passage of water protected by land on both sides.
Well, we're finally going to go diving in Ushuaia, and I'm really excited to try to see something that they're famous for. You mostly see it in the restaurants downtown, but I want to see it alive, the giant king crab.
Captain Carlos from Ushuaia Divers unties the boat from the dock, and we're on our way under a beautiful blue sky. It's summer here in the southern hemisphere, and even though Ushuaia is very far south, the air temperature regularly makes it into the 60-degree range, sometimes even the 70s. The water temperature is more like 45 degrees, about what I'm used to diving at home in New England. That means I'll be wearing my dry suit.
Time to get ready.
It keeps the water out with an airtight zipper like the one on a spacesuit. Unfortunately, the dry suit is quite buoyant from all the air inside, so I have to wear a lot of weight to submerge. My gear is cumbersome and heavy, but that's the price you pay to dive in cold water. All right, I'm ready. Let's go check it out!
That's okay?
Underwater, the Beagle Channel is beautiful, filled with huge kelp forests stretching towards the surface. This kelp is a kind of fast-growing algae that can grow several feet in length every day. Swimming through the kelp is really fun. I feel like Indiana Jones exploring a wild jungle. The kelp can grow tall without a strong tree trunk because it floats, thanks to these little air pockets at the base of each leaf. The kelp is so thick, it blocks out the sun. As I look around the bottom, I see there are lots of other things growing here, like a variety of sponges encrusting this rock outcropping. But clearly, the Beagle Channel's most impressive animals are the crabs. Everywhere I look, crabs jump out of my way as I approach. Most of them are these little red crabs with a body about the size of a quarter. But there are also decorator crabs covered in camouflage, apparently willing to hunt the smaller crabs. And another crab climbing the kelp to safety. But at last I find what I came for, the crab that rules this patch of ocean, the king crab. Although they get much bigger than this, even this small one's quite a handful. After I put it down, the crab takes off through the seaweed on the bottom. Finally, settling back to pose for my camera again. At the end of my dive, I surface from the land of the crabs, and we enjoy a surface interval on a small island in the channel. The views of the surrounding area are beautiful. Patagonia is just gorgeous. As much as I've enjoyed Ushuaia, the following morning finds me rolling my gear down the dock for my departure to Antarctica. My home away from home, the Alexei Marashev, a 210-foot-long Russian research vessel with an ice-strengthened hull. I meet the staff of the ship, who, luckily for me, speak English quite well, and then it's time to board. I'll have plenty of time to put my gear together on the long run to Antarctica. A little later, they untie us from the dock, and it's time to embark on the trip of a lifetime. On our way down the Beagle Channel to open water, we pass a small rock island covered in South American sea lions. And then we pass the famous Beagle Channel Lighthouse. After leaving the Beagle Channel, we round Cape Horn into the Drake Passage and make our way more than 600 miles south until we reach the protection afforded by the end of the Antarctic Peninsula. Until then, we're at the mercy of some of the most violent and unpredictable seas in the world. From the bridge, the first officer drives the ship with a confidence that comes from many years of making this journey. Our progress is charted on a map by a GPS. So far, the weather has been mild and the seas calm.
The Drake Passage is considered the roughest section of water in the world, and boy, did we get lucky today.
Later, the fog closes in, but the sea remains calm. I have almost 3 days of this until we get there. Even my tiny cabin isn't too uncomfortable for a nap. The next day, the sun is out, but we still aren't there.
You know, 2.5 days is a long time to be sitting on a ship with nothing to do. But when we get to Antarctica, it's gonna be worth it.
With yet another day to go, I'm running out of things to do.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Wrong room.
Wooka? Wanuka? Wahooka?
Hello?
Forget it.
At last, land appears in the distance. We made it to Antarctica. The ship is covered in a fresh layer of snow, but the sun is trying to burn through the clouds. Icebergs float by. I can hardly believe my eyes. I'm actually here. And we don't waste any time. Our dive team starts suiting up for our first dive to explore the underwater world of Antarctica. Of course, I'm using my dry suit again, but this time instead of 45-degree water, I'm expecting 30-degree water. Our Zodiac goes over the side, and we're off with our dive master Jonas driving the boat. I'm really excited. I can't wait to get below the surface and start exploring. But first, I need my warmest dive gloves.
It's very interesting to do anything when you have gigantic, fat, cold water mitts on. Just putting on your dive computer takes about 10 minutes. All right.
I'm bundled up with my heaviest undergarments. I have so much insulation, I can barely move.
Well, I'm a long way from the Caribbean. I came all the way to Antarctica to go diving, and I guess I should have expected that there was going to be ice in the water. I'm assuming that means it's going to be pretty cold. I'll let you know. Woo-hoo! Oh yeah, that's a little chilly. Oh baby.
I'm floating in an ocean filled with icebergs drifting by.
This water is below freezing. That's possible because it's salt water. This is fresh water, so the ice is frozen, floating in it. This water is so cold that if you fell into this water without a dry suit on, you could be dead in 5 minutes.
And that begs the question, what could possibly live in such cold water?
Well, let's go check it out.
My first glimpse of the underwater terrain reveals mostly just some seaweed on the bottom, flowing gently in the current. But a closer look reveals a community of bottom-dwelling invertebrates, including vast armies of limpets, snail-like animals with cone-shaped shells. They eat the algae on the rocks. A bright red sea star hunts down limpets for lunch. Nearby, anemones wait for prey, their stinging tentacles armed and ready for an unwary fish. A sea cucumber uses feathery branching arms to grab plankton out of the water to eat. But then I look up from the bottom and something catches my eye. It's a Gentoo penguin swimming around with the grace of a dolphin and the speed of a torpedo. These birds might not be able to fly, but underwater they sure can swim. Their wings are adapted for providing underwater propulsion, and few animals in the ocean can swim with such grace and speed as a penguin. In the limited visibility, they're hard to film because I never know from which direction they'll swim. Just above the water on the beach, thousands of gentoos are warming up in the sun. A Gentoo penguin is easy to identify because of its bright red beak. Many of these gentoos are barely more than chicks, waiting patiently for their downy baby feathers to fall off. These poofy feathers keep them warm when they're little, but they're not good for swimming. I watch a group of young penguins practicing their swimming technique in a small tide pool. The tide pool offers protection from the open ocean, and it's a nice shallow spot to try swimming and hunting. Unfortunately, there's nothing here to eat, so foraging for food doesn't produce a meal. As the birds get older and their adult feathers grow in, they start gathering down by the ocean. Soon they take short hops into the freezing water to hunt in the shallows for krill and small invertebrates. It doesn't take long before they learn to swim like experts and take off to hunt together in groups. Penguins on the move porpoise in and out of the water like dolphins. But then they can hop right back up on land like no dolphin I've ever seen. Who needs to fly when you can swim like this? Soon we head back to the ship and pull anchor to move a few hours south. We're making our way towards the polar circle and passing some incredible scenery on the way. The next day, back in the Zodiacs, we head towards a shipwreck. The Governor was a whaling ship that caught fire in 1916, so the captain ran it aground to save the crew. I drop into the water to explore the southernmost shipwreck of my life. Although the bow is out of the water, the stern lies over 70 feet below. It's a long swim down the side of the hull to get to the stern. The hull is covered in patches of beautiful yellow finger sponges. I didn't realize that sponges like this could be found in such cold water. Looking closer at the sponges, I discover an Antarctic blenny resting there. Fish survive in this water because they have antifreeze in their blood that keeps it from freezing even when the water is below 32 degrees. Suddenly, a huge shape catches my eye. It's the biggest jelly I've ever seen in my life, swimming through the water with tentacles hanging down more than 50 feet. I swim over to investigate this massive animal, and the bell of the jelly is more than 2 feet across. As I rise towards the surface at the end of my dive, I encounter a huge wall of ice. It's an iceberg that drifted into the bay. The wall of the iceberg is covered in dimples like the ones on a golf ball. This pattern forms as the iceberg melts. Thousands of tiny bubbles are released from the melting ice as well, making the water near the iceberg look like a fizzy drink. The iceberg only rises a few feet above the surface, but it's more than 30 feet deep.
When you see an iceberg floating by, there's not that much above water sometimes, but that's because more than 90% of an iceberg is actually underwater. If I flip it over, you can see just how much ice there is. That's why icebergs are really dangerous to ships, because you can't see the part that's hidden underwater. Fun with ice. Let me get my arm under it.
Getting the gear out of the water and into the Zodiac can be quite a challenge because of all the weight I have to carry. Heading back to the ship, we have a little time to unwind while we again change locations, heading even further south. We pass through the Lemaire Channel filled with floating chunks of ice. I can hear them bouncing off the bow, and I'm glad that this ship has an ice-strengthened hull. The next morning, we're at it again, launching the Zodiacs over the side and preparing for another adventure. I carry my camera down to the boat, and we're off. Today, we're hunting quietly for a very special animal. And sure enough, we found them. Leopard seals sleeping on an iceberg. These animals, which reach 12 feet long, are the apex predators of the Antarctic. There are no sharks in the waters of Antarctica, but these seals fill that niche in the food chain.
Yeah, cool.
Soon, the leopard seals wake from their nap and come over to investigate us. They've been known to bite and deflate Zodiacs when they're being territorial. We watch carefully for a few minutes before we drop into the water with this animal. Leopard seals are big, aggressive, and have sharp teeth. But this one doesn't look aggressive at all. I must admit, I'm a little apprehensive as I prepare to roll into the water, but I'm also excited. I've wanted to film a leopard seal for a long time. The seal makes a few passes to check me out, but he seems a lot more curious than aggressive. I don't follow the seal at all, but hold my ground and keep the camera rolling. I let him come to me. Divers are not very common down here. This leopard seal has probably never seen a diver or a video camera before. Either he sees his reflection in the lens, or he's looking for a career in show business. Either way, this animal sure doesn't seem to mind my presence. The leopard seal is so curious that he stays around for more than an hour. I even have enough time to go get my still camera and take a few pictures. Look how big he is compared to me. It's a good thing he's in a good mood. Although leopard seals can hold their breath for an hour while diving, this one lounging with me near the surface regularly pops his nose above water for a breath.
That was such a great dive with that leopard seal. Man, it was so friendly. It stayed with me for over an hour. But I've been in this water for so long, my face is frozen.
With the circulation returning to my face, we head back to the ship, while I think of all the great things I saw in Antarctica, from the towering walls of a tremendous iceberg to a gigantic jelly. I saw incredible underwater acrobatics and astonishingly beautiful scenery. Penguins nesting among the ancient bones of whales. And humpbacks feeding in some of the most beautiful bays I've ever seen. From the surprising color of the invertebrates living in the freezing water to the stark beauty of the frozen landscape, Antarctica is spectacular to behold. Soon, we must turn north for our long journey back to Ushuaia. As the sun sets on the passing ice, I have plenty of time to reminisce about my adventures. As we leave the protection of the Antarctic Peninsula, we discover the Drake Passage is not as kind as it was on the way down. But for that incredible hour I spent with a curious leopard seal, it's worth it. Antarctica might be cold, and the diving is hard work, but I'll never forget this magical place way down at the bottom of the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Everyone knows that the Bahamas have beautiful beaches and lush coral reefs, but they're also world-renowned for cave diving. And in the Bahamas, cave diving usually means blue holes. In particular, the island of Andros has dozens of blue holes clearly visible from the air.
Walking through the forest here on Andros, you can see that the forest floor is the remains of an ancient seabed. This limestone was formed by coral reefs millions of years ago.
Rain, combining with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, creates mild carbonic acid, otherwise known as acid rain, which slowly dissolves limestone.
Millions of years of rain falling on this rock and then draining in have slowly dissolved away the rock, creating these odd little crevices and holes, and it's made the whole floor of the forest look like a gigantic piece of Swiss cheese. Some of the holes have gotten pretty big. I mean, this one's the size of a hot tub. But in a few places, the holes are enormous and full of water. These are the blue holes. It's easy to see how the blue holes got their name. Andros is covered in them. They look like circular ponds from the air and often lead into vast underwater cave systems. I've teamed up with Small Hope Bay Lodge and dive master Mike Hornby to explore the Guardian, one of the more famous blue holes on Andros. It's a hike through the brush to get there.
We have about a quarter of a mile. We're going to have to carry our gear in.
I gotta walk all the way in here in my full scuba gear?
Yep.
Oh man.
Well, we haven't got too far to go. We're just about ready to round the corner, and it's going to open up into a beautiful blue hole. Okay, Jonathan, here it is. This is the Guardian blue hole.
Wow. It doesn't look that blue.
If you look off in the distance there and you see that little bit of an archway,
Yeah.
that is going to lead into one cave system, and right down here, this is the entrance into our other cave system.
So this is where we're going down
Yes, so the Guardian blue hole is the portal for the cave systems that lie underneath.
So I head back to get my camera.
This is a lot less convenient than boat diving.
It takes several trips to get my camera plus all the other gear to the water.
What I want to know is, who was the first guy to discover this muddy hole and say, hey, this would be a great place to go for a dive? I mean, look at it.
Back at the truck, Mike and I start suiting up. We will walk in our gear to the water. Mike, as a cave diving instructor, will be my guide to exploring the blue hole.
Thank you.
Mike wears some specific gear for cave diving, including redundant dive computers, an extra regulator, and he will even be carrying a spare scuba tank.
So I'm not quite as technical as Mike, but I do have some specialized gear for cave diving. So I have a scuba tank. It's a normal scuba tank, but it has an H valve on it. It has two separate independent first stages. So I've got my normal regulator that I always use on the first one, and a completely separate redundant backup regulator on the other one. So that way I can turn one off, turn the other one on. If I were to have a problem with either one of my regulators, I have a completely secondary backup. For lighting, my lights on my camera, my huge video lights, those are my primary lights, but I have a flashlight in my pocket and a chemical light stick, which you break it, it glows, you have 12 hours of light, and it has no batteries. That's probably more light than I'm gonna need.
With all our gear assembled and ready, we hike into the brush, and man, is it hot! Nothing like a long walk in the hot Bahamian sun wearing full scuba gear and a wetsuit to burn off a few calories.
This water is going to feel extremely good after that warm walk through here.
Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Finally, it's time to jump into the water and explore the Guardian.
Oh, that feels so good. Well, it's time to go check it out.
As I sink down into the yellowish green water, I can hardly see because it's so murky. I'm following Mike's pink fins. He specifically uses the brightest pink he can find so the people following behind can see him in limited visibility. Cameraman Tim is right behind me, bringing up the rear as we sink down into the dark, spooky hole in the ground. As we descend, we pass through layers of what looks like smoke in the water. Mike points out these clouds of suspended sediments to me as we keep sinking. The blue hole leads into a huge cave system, and it's a lot deeper than you might imagine. Periodically, Mike turns to make sure we're still here, and his flashlight illuminates a permanent guideline that previous divers have installed. This line guides the way out in case we get disoriented. The walls on each side of us go straight down. We're sinking into a deep crack. As we get deeper, the walls get closer together, but the water gets clearer. We've passed into seawater from the fresh water above. I can taste the salt on my lips. If we could go far enough, eventually we could reach the ocean. Mike points to ancient fossilized seashells embedded into the limestone. Here's a conch shell. Our bubbles are hitting the rock overhangs and knocking off sediment, which is raining down around us, reducing the visibility. I continue to follow Mike until finally at 150 feet deep, we reach some stalactites in a formation called candle wax. These were formed by dripping water during the last ice age when sea levels were much lower and this part of the cave was dry. Down below me, it's more than 500 feet deep in this cave. I don't think we'll be going down there. We turn around and start heading back, with Mike continuing to point out fossils. Following our guideline back into the shallower, murky water, Tim is right behind me. And Mike, with his spare scuba tank slung under his arm, is right ahead. Periodically, markers on the line point the way out. These can be used in the event of a light failure to feel your way to the surface. At last, we can see the dim glow of daylight from above as we ascend towards the sun. Back in the shallows of the blue hole, Mike shows me around. The bottom looks like it's sand, but it's actually a deep layer of silt. While Tim hovers high above the bottom to keep from kicking up silt, I perform a little experiment. Down on the bottom, I plunge my arm into the silt up to my shoulder, and it's even deeper than that. This is a layer of decomposing leaves and other organic stuff. The decomposition creates hydrogen sulfide, a deadly gas that smells like rotting eggs. The water is saturated with hydrogen sulfide, and I can smell it in the water that seeps around the edge of my mask.
Wow. Whew. That dive can only be described as spooky. The water is kind of colored like mustard, and you can't really see where you're going, and it's all swirly. And if I wasn't following Mike, I would have been totally lost. That dive was very spooky, but really interesting.
The next day, I'm out on the ocean, suiting up for another dive. Mike has something he wants me to see. After the last dive, I can't imagine what crazy thing he's thinking now. I roll into the water and follow Mike and his trademark pink fins down to the reef. Then we keep going down into a cavern below the reef. At the bottom of the cavern, Mike points to a hole and motions for me to go in ahead of him. Once again, it's pretty spooky, but exciting at the same time. So, in I go, with Tim and Mike right behind me. Inside, it opens up into a big cave. We're not deep enough for stalactites, though. As we come around a corner, I look straight up to see light coming in from above through a huge crack in the rock. We make our way right up the fissure into the blue above. I'm in an ocean blue hole, formed just like an inland blue hole 20,000 years ago during an ice age when the ocean levels were much lower. Once the ocean levels rose, this blue hole ended up underwater. But this blue hole connects through a vast labyrinth of caves to the inland blue holes. And as we emerge into the open ocean, something looks weird. When the tide goes out, all the water from inside the caves gets sucked out into the ocean, bringing with it silt and hydrogen sulfide from the inland blue holes. It forms clouds near the bottom with a distinct line between the clear ocean water above and the silty hydrogen sulfide layer below. What you're seeing here are the decomposing remains of forest vegetation which have passed entirely through the caves and out into the ocean. Everywhere I find what look like strands of mucus floating in the water. It's most likely mucus secreted by the coral in response to the caustic hydrogen sulfide. It's stuck on everything, including this gorgonian, which has closed all its polyps to protect itself from the hydrogen sulfide. As the tide carries the toxic water away, the corals will go back to normal. Finally, we head back to the boat. Tim and Mike hang onto the anchor line to do a short safety stop before we surface. My exploration of the Guardian Blue Hole on Andros was both fascinating and a little spooky, but I have to admit, I'm intrigued. There are quite a few more blue holes on Andros for me to explore, so I'll be back.
The whale shark is the largest fish in the sea, and it would take an enormous aquarium to hold a whale shark. I'm here at the Georgia Aquarium, the largest aquarium in the world. They don't have a whale shark. They have 4.
The Georgia Aquarium is one of the world's most spectacular. It houses exhibits ranging from coral reefs to kelp forests, saltwater to freshwater, warm water to cold water, and just about everything in between. But there's no doubt that the 6.3 million gallon Ocean Voyager exhibit is the most impressive part of the Georgia Aquarium. It's as deep as a 3-story building, and the main viewing window is larger than a movie theater screen, creating a fantastic place to sit and watch the fish go by. I enjoy the bubble window where I can relax and watch the sharks. There's also a tunnel through the Ocean Voyager so people can walk underneath the marine life, which includes some of nature's most magnificent animals like manta rays and whale sharks. Keeping manta rays and whale sharks in captivity is difficult. First of all, these are huge animals. Mantas grow larger than a car, and whale sharks larger than a bus. So they need a lot of space. But they pose another interesting challenge as well. Both are filter feeders. In the wild, they strain their planktonic food by swimming with an open mouth and capturing small animals from the water on their gill rakers. In an aquarium, there's no plankton. Aquarists had to train the animals for hand feeding. To learn how they feed the mantas, I make my way to the top of the Ocean Voyager exhibit, a nearly football field-sized fish tank. There I meet Chris Coco, the curator of zoological operations.
We'll be staged here, and this is where you're going to jump and help us load the ladle.
He introduces me to biologists Christy Elo and Kelly Maples, the aquarists who are going to show me how to feed the mantas.
All right, this is Christy and Kelly.
Hi, nice
Jonathan
to meet
Bird.
you, Jonathan. Kelly, nice to meet you.
These 2 are the biologists up here that work the animals every day.
You guys are lucky.
The mantas are fed a combination of krill and small fish from a ladle. Since the mantas can't swim in place, they have to be fed while they swim by gently ladling the food out in front of their mouths.
Wow, fantastic. Here we go. We'll fill it up. About that much? That's good? Excellent.
After observing a few times, now it's my turn to try.
Okay, and then you just trickle it out.
Yeah, the key is to not dump it too soon. She's going to stick with you and stick with the ladle, so.
A little more, or then? I don't know, I'm a little nervous. There's all these people watching. I don't want to mess it up. I mean, it looks so easy, but I know it's not.
The one thing that we do ask, the one thing that it can be a little difficult when you get a little bit of water in as you go, try to keep the ladle out in front of her. She gets moving kind of fast, so it is possible to kind of hit her in the face with the ladle. So.
How's that? All right. Woo! Thank you very much. Thank you so much. That was cool. How many people get to do that? I got to feed a manta ray. That is so cool.
Feeding the whale sharks is even more complicated. It involves the aquarists using small boats to keep ahead of the moving whale sharks.
This is like a precision ballet of whale shark feeding. These ropes go all the way across the tank, and each aquarist has to pull themselves along in a boat, scooping out the food, staying just ahead of the whale shark. But what's really amazing is that each whale shark gets a different diet, so they're only feeding one particular shark. And the sharks are trained to only follow one particular boat. The best part about it is nobody bumps into each other. It's amazingly well orchestrated, and really, I can't imagine how long it took to train the sharks to do this.
While I get the bird's eye view of the feeding from above, the aquarium visitors get the fisheye view from below in the tunnel with the sharks feeding directly overhead. If feeding these animals looks a little complicated, imagine how hard it was to get them here. It all started in Taiwan, where the sharks are hunted for food. The Georgia Aquarium teamed up with a local fisherman to capture a live whale shark. Once they had it in a pen, they transferred it to a specially made sling. Then it was transferred into a custom tank with life support for an overseas flight. Finally, the shark was flown on a private charter across the Pacific all the way to Atlanta, where it was driven to the aquarium. It's quite a journey for a shark. Given how expensive and difficult it is to get whale sharks all the way to the Georgia Aquarium, the staff isn't taking any chances when it comes to their care. The rooms where food is prepared are nearly as clean as operating rooms. And the water quality is constantly monitored. I spend some time down in the pump room with John Masson, the assistant manager of life support.
John, this place is huge. Tell me about these pumps.
Well, here at the Georgia Aquarium, we have about 36 50 horsepower pumps on this side of the room, 34 25 horsepower pumps on the other side, which means we pump about 140,000 gallons a minute through this room, which is enough to turn over 6.3 million gallons in under an hour.
So you can pump the entire exhibit, 6.3 million gallons in 1 hour.
Yeah, actually we can. It's equivalent of one of these pumps can actually fill a swimming pool in about 15 minutes, which about 30,000 gallons. So each one does about 2,000 gallons.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
It is a lot of water.
I notice there's no leaks.
We try to minimize all of our leaks at least, yes.
Good plumbing.
Yeah, it's nice.
Now you might be wondering, if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, and you want to have 6.3 million gallons of ocean water, what do? Well, Instant Ocean, gigantic bags of powdered sea salt and minerals. Mix it with fresh water, and you got ocean.
And I'm about ready to try diving in this inland ocean, so I head upstairs for my briefing with dive master Devin Fleming.
All right, so basically once we get done here, we're gonna get you guys set up in the locker rooms. We're gonna throw in the dock for you, move your gear down there. It is also basically valet diving. So once we get done with the briefing, you guys are gonna get changed and we're gonna head down to the dock. Just put your fins, your mask and gloves on. We'll get your gear put on for you guys, and then we're gonna ask you to do a forward roll into the water once your dive masters cleared you to go.
While I go and get my gear on, they put the dock in the water. They don't leave it in all the time because the animals might injure themselves on it. Now the moment I've been waiting for all day.
Oh, and look, they gave me a sign so I won't mistake my gear for anybody else's. You know what's interesting about this is they don't want to get any contaminants into the exhibit, so they don't even want us to use our own dive gear. We have to use wetsuits from the aquarium, BCs, regulators, everything. They were really nice though, and they let me use my own fins, but first we had to put them in disinfectant, so they are now extremely clean. Yeah, they won't hurt you at all. To go in?
Yes, you may enter the water.
All right, let's go check it out.
All right.
There's a whale shark right under me. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Before I even have my camera, a whale shark swims silently right below the dock. It's hard to believe that I'm in a giant fish tank with a whale shark.
Welcome to the world's largest aquarium. Enjoy your dive and your tour with Devin this morning and 5,000 or 6,000 of your favorite friends.
On the bottom, a great hammerhead comes over to check me out. I follow Devin down towards the deep end of the exhibit, and Tallulah, the manta ray, swims over to say hello. Soon I pass over the tunnel with lots of people inside. They're looking up at me, and I can't help but think how lucky I am to be able to do this dive. I wave to the kids and keep moving with Devin to the deep part of the exhibit. A whale shark with a school of jacks keeping him company swims over me. The whale sharks move around this huge tank in circles and figure eights. They're used to the divers and don't mind us at all. There's so much marine life in this exhibit that sometimes I forget I'm doing a dive in an aquarium. My camera moves from whale shark to great hammerhead. Then on to Nandi, the other manta ray, doing barrel rolls. Then, back to another hammerhead. Through the enormous viewing window, the crowd watches the action, a sand tiger shark passing right in front of the glass. The experience is almost overwhelming. It would take quite a few dives to get used to this. I just can't believe my eyes. There are so many fish. On the bottom, a sawfish catches my attention. This is a kind of ray with a saw-like nose for hunting prey. I've never even seen one of these in the wild, but they have nearly a dozen of them in this exhibit. One of the aquarium staff divers peacefully enjoys a sand tiger shark lazily drifting by. In spite of their fierce-looking teeth, these sharks are no threat to people. They eat smaller prey. Soon, my dive nears the end. On our way back to the shallow end of the exhibit, I pass once again over the tunnel with the people looking up. And Tallulah buzzes by again as if to bid me farewell. Devin gives me the signal to head up to the surface. It was such a short dive, I don't know if I can bring myself to getting out of the water.
I have never been on a dive with so many species of fish. I don't even know where to point my camera. I gotta go back in.
Maybe they won't notice if I stay just a little while longer. This is one dive I just don't want to end.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
Goliath groupers. They're among the largest reef fish in the world. They used to be common throughout the Caribbean, but then their numbers started to plummet in the 1980s.
That's because everybody wants to catch an 800-pound fish. So pretty soon, the Goliath grouper had been fished almost to extinction. In 1990, the U.S. government had to take drastic measures to protect these fish, so they passed a law that banned all fishing of Goliath groupers. Now, 19 years later, they're making a remarkable comeback.
The Goliath grouper is still very rare. In fact, most divers have never even seen one. David Duboulet, the world-famous National Geographic magazine photographer, has invited me to join him and his wife, Jen Hayes, who's also his photo assistant, on a Goliath grouper filming expedition. How could I turn down an invitation like that? So I head down to beautiful West Palm Beach, Florida in September on a mission to see one of these magnificent fish in person. We board the Shearwater, a large dive boat that will be our base of operations for a week. I'm really excited as we pull away from the dock. Captain Jim Abernathy is taking us to a shipwreck where the groupers are known to hide. It's not far from the sprawling coastline of West Palm Beach. Since it's only a 10-minute ride to the first shipwreck where we'll be looking for Goliath groupers, I get right to work putting my gear together.
Great, we're gonna go find some Goliath groupers. Maybe they'll be bigger than me, which isn't really that hard, actually.
We've arrived at the wreck of the Mitzpah, which sits on the seafloor 80 feet below. The question is, are there any Goliath groupers down there?
Well, let's go find out.
After I get in, David and Jen follow with their still cameras. My cameraman Pierre and I start descending to the wreck. Once we hit the bottom, Pierre and I will stay out of David and Jen's way. We're greeted by a very strong current. I can barely hold my place in the sand. We struggle to make our way to the wreck where the Goliath groupers like to hang out. Shipwrecks are magnets for fish. That's because they provide a great place for fish to hide and rest on what might otherwise be a very flat, featureless seafloor. The shipwrecks off the east coast of Florida have become some of the best places to find Goliath groupers, but a typical shipwreck only has one or two of them hanging around. Things are different here in September. That's when the Goliath groupers get together in large numbers to spawn. We're thrilled to find some big Goliath groupers. David is getting up close and personal with some big fish. And it looks like he's getting some good pictures too. The groupers don't like the current much either, so they hide behind the wreck the same way one might hide behind a large object to get out of the wind. An even better place to hide is inside the wreck. I make my way over to a doorway to have a peek into the dark interior. I can see a couple Goliath groupers in there. I swim inside to see if I can get some closer shots. They tolerate my presence until I get a little too close. Then they swim away, spooked by a diver in such close quarters with them. But outside, they let me get really close. These groupers are surrounded by little silvery fish called cigar minnows. The minnows might look like they're hiding out of the current, but they're really aggregating close to the groupers. What could they be up to? The Goliath groupers look like they're just hanging out, but they're waiting for something, just like the cigar minnows. Later, when the current relaxes, dozens of groupers are gathering together in the water column above the wreck. What's going on? It's the mating season, and these fish are preparing to spawn, probably at dusk or after sunset. Unfortunately, I'm low on air and I need to head back to the surface. Pierre and I do a safety stop on the anchor line as we eagerly anticipate the next dive.
That is incredible. Those fish are so huge. They're like the size of refrigerators. Unbelievable.
As the massive fish gather into groups for their evening spawning, I'm up above getting ready. I hope I don't miss anything.
These fish only spawn once a year, in September, during the full moon, at dusk. And they only do it for maybe 1 or 2 nights. We know they spawned last night, so this might be my last chance to film this.
So, as the sun gets low in the sky, Pierre and I jump back into the water. We head back down to the wreck. The Goliath groupers are all around the wreck in abundance. These groupers are so large that they don't need to worry about too many predators. With almost no current now, they head away from the protection of the wreck into open water. Clouds of cigar minnows stick to the groupers like glue, eagerly anticipating millions of delicious eggs that the groupers will release when they spawn. The medium-sized fish, called jacks, make runs at the cigar minnows to see if they can catch a meal. David is caught up in the action, photographing the cigar minnows surrounding the groupers. I keep looking for any kind of mating activity, but something totally unexpected catches my eye. It's a manta ray swimming among the groupers. I move in for a shot of the ray. It doesn't seem afraid of me. I have to believe it's no coincidence that a manta has shown up here. Mantas are filter feeders, and this one is probably hoping to join the cigar minnows and feed on some grouper eggs. The manta seems intrigued by our video lights, and she keeps coming over to me. So I put my camera down and give her a little belly rub. And then the manta swings around and says hi to Pierre. What a thrill for both of us! Any dive with a manta ray and fish the size of refrigerators is definitely a good day at the office. Mantas are awesome, but I need to keep my attention and my camera focused on the big groupers so I don't miss anything. The cigar minnows are crowding in even tighter to the groupers. You can hardly even tell there's a big fish in the middle of all that. It's an amazing spectacle to observe. These enormous fish would make Michael Jordan feel small, and the cigar minnows are just magical to watch. We see a lot of what looks like courting, but no spawning. Maybe the groupers are more bothered by our presence than they let on, or maybe they're just waiting until dark. But as it gets later and later, we're running out of light and air. Reluctantly, Pierre and I must head back to the surface. It looks like the spawning will happen later in the evening, and I'll miss it. Back aboard the boat, David and Jen are looking at their shots.
See that? That is really nice.
Even though we didn't see the actual spawning, the dive was still well worth the effort.
That was an incredible experience. Those fish are just majestic, covered with all those beautiful fish. We didn't actually see the spawning event. Not sure if they're maybe doing it now, but we finally had to come up. We ran out of time and it was really dark, but unbelievable. That was something I will never forget.
The Goliath Grouper is a spectacular example of successful marine conservation. This vulnerable fish was pushed to the very brink of extinction, but was saved at the last minute by laws to protect them. In less than 20 years, they've made a strong comeback. And although their population has not yet fully recovered, they're well on their way. The Great Barrier Reef. It's probably the most famous reef in the world, and the largest. It's not just visible from the air, but from space.
You know, it's hard to believe I've been diving for over 20 years, and I've never seen the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. But today, I've made it all the way to Cairns, and I'm gonna get my chance.
Cairns is a city in Queensland, the northeast state of Australia. The Great Barrier Reef runs 1,600 miles along the coast of Queensland. It's made of millions of interconnected coral heads, forming the world's largest structure made by living organisms. To see the whole thing, you need to get pretty high up. This satellite image was made from 400 miles above the ocean. You can see the reef just offshore. For my first encounter on the Great Barrier Reef, I'll be making the trip out on a big catamaran operated by Sunlover Cruises. The crew unties the boat and I enjoy the scenery as we head offshore. "90 minutes later, I arrive at the Sunlover pontoon. I have never seen a dive operation like this before. The boat is huge, but we don't dive from the boat. Instead, we dock at this massive pontoon, sort of like a floating dive shop, and spend the day right next to the reef in a protected spot. Pure luxury. Time to check out the facilities.
You don't have to be a scuba diver to enjoy the Great Barrier Reef. The reef is so shallow, you can snorkel.
A lot of people who don't dive love to come out and get a first-hand look at the reef here. The water is clear and it's not too deep. But even people who don't like to get wet can see the reef on a submarine.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is the easy way to see the underwater world right here. Just relax, sit back, have a drink, watch the fish go by.
And for a diving experience unlike any other, anyone can try the Sea Walker experience. All you need is a 40-pound helmet. I walk down the stairs into the water, and the staff outfits me with the strangest piece of dive gear I've ever used. With no fins on, I just walk out to a massive school of fish. My hair doesn't even get wet.
This is incredible. They've got about 1,000 fish around here. I feel like Dr. Sylvia Earle, deep sea diver. This is a very different way to go scuba diving. And this just goes to show you, if you don't want to wear a mask, and you don't want to wear a regulator, and maybe you can't even swim that well, you can do this. It's just like walking. You know, I've had a lot of experiences underwater, and this is definitely one of the most unique. To demonstrate how this helmet works, I have an ordinary water glass, which obviously is full of water. But if I turn it upside down, I can fill it with air. And now you can see that it keeps the air in. But if you turn it right side up, so we don't want to turn this right side up.
I pose for a picture because you never know when you're going to get to do this again. Next, I meet Vance Fahey, who will be my dive master for a scuba dive on the reef today.
Well, I can't wait. Let's get suited up.
Get right into it.
All right. Well, let's do it.
Not only do I have a nice, easy staircase to walk right down into the water, but a platform for putting on my fins. I can get used to this. On the platform is a group of new divers getting their first taste of the underwater world. At last, I head out onto the reef to explore. I see many types of hard corals, beautiful pastel-colored soft corals, and lots of fan corals. Near the reef, I find one of the largest giant clams I've ever seen. I can't imagine how much this clam must weigh. The mantle gets its bright colors from embedded symbiotic algae that harvest the sun's rays for energy. I find a huge crack in the reef and have a little fun swimming through it. On the other end, I'm greeted by a sea turtle. She comes right over. There are lots of divers around this reef, and this turtle knows that the divers won't hurt her. Once she has decided that I'm not doing anything terribly interesting, she goes back to looking for her favorite sponges to eat. I turn and head back towards the platform across the shallow reef. At the platform, I'm greeted by a friendly Moray wrasse. This monster of a fish reaches both the length and the weight of a motorcycle. I'm just glad they prefer to eat crustaceans and mollusks, not divers. I think I've made a new friend. Unfortunately, I'm low on air and it's time to head back to my habitat up above. As we head back to the dock, I reflect on a fun-filled day. It's amazing how many things I did in one day on the reef.
Well, I finally did it. I got to see the Great Barrier Reef. And I discovered that of all the reefs I've visited, and let me tell you, that's a lot of reefs, the Great Barrier Reef is probably the most accessible for everybody from certified divers all the way to people that don't even like to swim. There's something for every age and experience level out here on the Barrier Reef.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to find some of the most amazingly camouflaged animals in the sea.
On a reef in the Pacific, a group of yellow-tailed blue damselfish hide near the coral, ready to duck into a hole at any moment. Between them all, watching and not moving a muscle, is a scorpion fish. His perfect camouflage is the result of skin that can change color to match the surroundings. The only thing that gives him away is the slight movement of his gills as he breathes. He's watching the damselfish. They're blissfully unaware of his presence. Soon, a damselfish comes too close. The scorpionfish is so confident in its camouflage that almost nothing can frighten it. Many animals in the ocean rely upon camouflage to hunt their prey or to avoid being eaten. This crocodile fish is so well camouflaged that divers rarely notice them. Even its eye has camouflage because a round black pupil would give it away. Like the crocodile fish, the frogfish is an ambush predator that hides using camouflage to look like a sponge with algae growing on it. It doesn't swim very much. Instead, it walks on its foot-like fins. It moves slowly so it doesn't give itself away. The frogfish is watching a group of tiny anthias waiting for one to come close enough to eat. The frogfish hasn't eaten in days, but no matter how hungry she is, she must wait patiently for prey to come to her. She watches and waits. It may be hours before she gets a meal. Later, as the sun sets, she's still waiting in the shadows, practically invisible to the anthias. A frogfish has the fastest mouth on the reef. It can open its mouth so fast that it slurps up a fish in less than 1/60th of a second. That's literally the blink of an eye. Even in slow motion, the gulp is barely visible. Her camouflage has really paid off.
Although sometimes camouflage is about blending into the bottom, other times a creature evolves to mimic another creature. This is called mimicry. Come check out this fish.
On an Indonesian reef, I find a beautiful pink sea fan. At first glance, you would never suspect that it has tiny inhabitants. But closer inspection reveals a seahorse, no larger than my fingernail. It's a pygmy seahorse. The color and knobby bumps on the pygmy seahorse's skin perfectly mimic the appearance of the sea fan where it lives, a classic example of mimicry. They're only visible if they move. These animals live their entire lives in safety because they're nearly invisible to predators, and they never have to leave the safety of the sea fan because they feed on plankton drifting right by their home. Out on the sand, away from the reef, a pair of what are apparently leaves drift down current. But upon closer inspection, they're not leaves at all. They just look like them. They're robust ghost pipefish, mimicking harmless drifting leaves so they can float up and pluck shrimp from the bottom. The robust ghost pipefish almost perfectly mimics a piece of eelgrass. Its relative, the ornate ghost pipefish, has taken a different approach to camouflage. It mimics the appearance of a harmless and not very tasty feather star. This fish is a poor swimmer, but it doesn't have to swim well because potential predators just don't see it. The sandy seafloor has a surprising number of animals that hide by blending in, and few do it as well as the flounder. Except for its breathing, this flat fish is nearly invisible. With a quick rippling of its body, this flounder puts a thin layer of sand over itself and vanishes. Of course, blending into the bottom is one thing, but what about animals that live up in the water column? Can they be camouflaged too? Absolutely. Many open ocean fish are silvery in color. Why? So they reflect the color of the water around them. It doesn't make them invisible, but a lot harder to see, especially from further away. Many sharks have a form of camouflage known as countershading. The underside of a shark is white, while the top of the shark is darker. When seen from below, the shark's lighter coloring underneath helps it blend in with the lighter water above. When viewed from above, the darker dorsal surface of the shark makes it blend into the darker water below. Pretty clever, huh? Some animals have coloration that makes them stand out instead of blend in. For many fish, the brighter the coloration, the easier it is to attract a mate. And it would seem that finding a mate is more important for these king angelfish than avoiding predators. A regal angelfish takes this coloration to an extreme. This fish wants to be noticed. This long-nosed butterfly fish has a clever adaptation of color to help confuse predators. There's a black dot at the base of its tail called a false eye spot. Its real eye is obscured by dark coloration running right through it. This is meant to confuse predators. The nudibranch, also called a sea slug, has bright coloration that scientists call aposematic. These animals are basically snails without a shell. They might look like a tasty and defenseless little snack for a passing fish, but in fact, many nudibranchs secrete a toxic acid that makes them inedible to virtually anything on the reef. Its bright aposematic coloration is a warning to potential predators that says, "I don't taste good." Perhaps the most incredible coloration possessed by a sea creature is that of the octopus. An octopus can change colors. This octopus is moving from reef to rubble to sand. It changes color and skin patterns as it goes to blend in. There are almost as many camouflage and color schemes in the ocean as there are fish in the sea. I'm always amazed by the things I observe in the blue world, and fortunately, I get to see this stuff even though I'm not very camouflaged at all.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
The ocean is full of fascinating animals and stories. I love to investigate and film these stories, and sometimes I get lucky. On a recent expedition, I learned about an amazing story of survival.
And that story involves a 10-foot-long pilot whale that was stranded here on the Caribbean island of Curacao.
The pilot whale's name is Sully, and his story began in July of 2009 when he stranded on a Curacao beach. But he was incredibly lucky to land there since it's home to the Curacao Sea Aquarium, one of the few places in the entire Caribbean with the facilities and expertise to care for him. George Kiefer, the president of the Southern Caribbean Cetacean Network, was quick to respond when he got a telephone call alerting him to the stranded pilot whale on a beach only 10 minutes from his office.
I could tell right away he was a pilot whale, but didn't know if it was a male or female. But wow, it was a skeleton. I mean, it was as emaciated as a whale or dolphin could possibly be and still be swimming. I mean, skin and bones. He had swam right out of the bay and then could come back in the bay again. So I don't think he was disoriented. I think it was one of those situations where, you know, this animal is physically incapable of keeping himself at the surface. So I think a lot of times these animals will strand because they just don't want to drown. You know, and if they can support themselves in some way in the shallows, that's what they're looking to do.
The Sea Aquarium staff immediately sprung into action. Because Sully was too weak to stay afloat on his own, they used foam pool floats to help support his weight, and lots of human helpers. Next, they needed to get some fluids into him because he was so dehydrated. Using a funnel attached to a plastic tube in his mouth, they poured fresh water right into his system. Although Sully lives in the sea and is surrounded by water, he can't drink any of it because it's salty. He gets all his fresh water in the fish and squid he normally eats. If he hasn't been eating, he hasn't been drinking either. Without lots of water fast, his kidneys would fail. Once Sully was hydrated, George decided to see if he would eat anything. The dolphins at the Sea Aquarium like herring, so George brought over a bucket of herring to try on Sully. He wasn't sure if the whale would accept food from him. But Sully was hungry and he gulped down the fish from George. He got so excited that they had a hard time keeping a hold on him. Soon they set up a makeshift pen, mostly to keep Sully safe from boats and curious swimmers. Sully had become a celebrity, and the crowd started gathering. Volunteers took turns not just helping to keep him afloat, but making sure he was safe. Within only a few days, Sully gained a lot of strength and looked like he was ready to swim by himself.
Is she swimming a little, Amy? Okay. Amy, drop off. Zeus, drop off. Yep, go.
The flotation devices were removed one at a time, and Sully swam on his own.
Good kick to the tail.
Up until that point, the volunteers had been calling him the Whale. George decided the pilot whale needed a name.
You know, I started calling him Sully as a nickname. I thought, yeah, we should be calling him something other than the Whale. So I thought, well, okay, pilot whale, who's a famous pilot? Then I thought of the pilot who landed his plane in the Hudson and kept all 155 people alive after falling out of the sky with no engines. I thought, that's pretty cool. Sully.
Within a few weeks, Sully was strong enough that he was getting rambunctious. George felt he needed to get some exercise. So they trained him to follow a boat. They started by feeding him fish from the boat inside his pen. Once he was used to following the boat around for food inside the pen, they took him just outside the pen and continued the training. Sully learned very quickly, and within a few days he would follow the boat way offshore at high speed. This daily exercise helped him get his strength back so he could return to the wild.
He can discharge us. He tells us when it's time to go.
By the time I arrived on the island 3 months later, Sully was back to full strength. He was being fed lots of fish several times a day. And every day or so, George would give Sully a rub down to get the dead skin off. Sully really enjoyed that. George would lie out on a board suspended above the water, and Sully would come right over.
Now, this is the only time we touch him, and that's to rub off all that loose skin.
But nobody ever went in the water with the whale because they didn't want to acclimate him to humans. If he became too friendly towards people, they might never get him to go back to his own kind. He might just start hanging around the beach looking for people to play with. But one question that constantly lingered in George's mind was, why did Sully strand in the first place? What was wrong with Sully, and was he better now? I joined George one morning as he took Sully out for his daily exercise swim. He seemed completely rehabilitated. Sully could keep up with the boat easily. George decided Sully was strong enough to go back to the wild.
So we took him straight out to sea, and we figured, well, once we get out there, we'll just sort of toss a few fish away from the boat and we'll leave him. And we did that. It took us about an hour offshore. We figured we're at least 10 miles out there. Well, okay, it's deep open water. This is their habitat. Hopefully he'll come across some pilot whales and head on back. So we're coming back at full speed, and that boat, I'm estimating you're talking about, 30 miles an hour, so maybe 45 kilometers per hour. We're moving. And so as we're heading back towards the island, a few minutes later, one of the crew on the boat, there's two other trainers with me, Naomi and Junior, and Naomi says, I think I see him back there.
What they discovered is just how fast Sully can swim. Even at full throttle, they couldn't lose him, and he followed the boat all the way back to his pen. Why wouldn't he go back to the wild? Maybe he didn't want to be alone. So George decided the only way they would ever get Sully back to the wild would be to hook him up with a pod of pilot whales. For weeks, every fisherman on the island and even the Coast Guard were keeping an eye out for a pod of pilot whales for Sully. Soon they found a pod. George and the Sea Aquarium staff led Sully out to the pod to make an introduction.
Oh, go, go, go! Go, man, go!
Looking at him. Yep, yep, keep
Go,
your fingers
man.
crossed, Dutch. All right, thanks.
Go, buddy, go!
Unfortunately, Sully had no interest. He looked at the pod and swam right back to the boat. Once again, he followed them straight back to his pen. Clearly, Sully had no intention of going back to the wild, but nobody knew why. Unfortunately, Sully couldn't stay in his pen. First of all, it was designed to be temporary, and the volunteers couldn't watch him forever. And he was eating 60 to 70 pounds of fish every day. The Sea Aquarium couldn't afford to keep feeding him. They had to find another facility to take care of Sully, someplace with the space and resources to handle a hungry pilot whale. Fortunately, SeaWorld in San Diego offered Sully a permanent home. Soon, George and his staff were preparing Sully for his first airplane ride. Using a sling, they loaded Sully onto a truck carrying a custom-made tank that would keep Sully in the water for his entire journey, over 3,000 miles. Soon, the truck departed from the Curacao Sea Aquarium for the airport. Sully was loaded onto a FedEx jet for his $100,000 private charter directly to San Diego. George and several volunteers went along to help out. During the flight, they took turns pouring water onto Sully to keep him cool and relaxed at 30,000 feet. 6 hours later, Sully arrived in San Diego, where they took him straight to SeaWorld. George was there too, and helped get Sully acquainted with his new home. Soon he was swimming around, none the worse for wear.
Boy, Sully.
In an effort to learn why Sully stranded, the Hub SeaWorld Marine Institute got together with the U.S. Navy Marine Mammal Program to test his hearing. Using sophisticated gear, they found the answer. Sully can't hear above 10 kilohertz. A normal pilot whale should be able to hear up to at least 100 kilohertz. So basically, Sully is hard of hearing. And without being able to hear those really high frequencies, he can't hunt using his echolocation in the deep ocean. Without being able to catch anything to eat, Sully was slowly starving to death. Since Sully's life depends on being fed, he can never go back to the wild. It's a good thing SeaWorld volunteered to take care of him. I head out to San Diego to visit my buddy Sully, and as soon as I see the Shamu-mobile, I know I'm in the right place. SeaWorld is known for their incredible dolphin and whale programs that bring thousands of people to appreciate life in the oceans. But what many people don't realize is that SeaWorld also has a huge rehabilitation program for stranded animals. I catch up with Sully in one of the rehab tanks far from the crowds out front. He smiles for my camera. I wonder if he remembers me.
We've been following his story.
Okay.
So this is sort of the completion of his story to be here.
Soon I'm introduced to Jennifer Shorney, one of Sully's trainers.
Oh, we all love Sully. Sully is a special place in everyone's heart.
Is he a ham? He looks, he's hamming it up for the camera over here.
Yes, he absolutely is a bit of a ham.
So tell me, what are you feeding him?
Sully gets a wide variety of fish. He's actually, a big bulk of his base right now is squid, but he's also getting some herring. He's learning to eat capelin as well as sardines. So he's eating all different types of fish.
Can I try feeding him?
Absolutely.
Wow. So what do I do? Just a couple fish?
Yeah, just take a couple fish
two or
and
three?
just toss them right on in.
All right.
Perfect.
Hey, so here we go.
And he's not particular about which way, front or back. And you'll see him sometimes when he's rearranging the food, he'll definitely push out all the water, but you can tell he gobbled those down real quick.
So 65 pounds a day?
Yes.
You're doing this a lot.
A lot. This is what we do.
How many times a day?
A lot.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, buddy. Thank
he says
you.
Hello. We're going to be stepping down numerous times throughout the day to him.
Squid. Oh, yeah. Look at him. He's like, I want the squid, I want the squid. All right, here comes. Yeah.
Oh, Sully, you're so good. Perfect.
Here we go.
Sully's favorite time of the day and things he absolutely loves. He loves to be rubbed down. So we called it the line of love. He loves it. And what we'll do is we're going to line ourselves up back there, and you'll just see him. It's almost like a car wash. He'll go back and forth and just absolutely love it.
I get the chance to join in on the line of love and give Sully a little rub.
My baby boy.
Look at him just rolling around.
I know. He absolutely loves it. It's your favorite time.
Sully has put on over 200 pounds since arriving at SeaWorld. He's a growing whale, eating 65 pounds of fish and squid every day.
See the skin coming off.
I know. And it's really amazing. I mean, and there you go.
Oh, look at that.
Hi, baby boy.
The ultimate.
Yes. So as you can tell, he's a pretty happy guy.
Well, how could he not be?
I know, right?
He's got 3 ladies giving him a rub there.
I know. He's got some acres.
Soon it's playtime. To keep Sully intellectually stimulated, his trainers give him a rotating selection of toys to play with. This one's his favorite. They call it the Sausage Lynx. He likes likes to grab it in his mouth and pull it underwater, which takes quite a bit of force.
That thing under.
I know, right?
The buoyancy on that thing. That must have 50 pounds of positive
It's amazing,
buoyancy.
and it looks so easy for him, doesn't it?
He also likes his beach hat.
There you go. He loves to collect his toys and bring them all together.
He's like, this would be easier if I had thumbs.
I know, right? But he does his best. He really is quite good at maneuvering them all.
Oh, for a thumb.
Oh, Sully. What's going on? You got your beach hat?
I got toys.
Yeah. So he's quite animated.
I got all my toys.
There he goes.
Like the last one.
Yep.
There we go.
There we go. Now we're moving. Now we got it.
Yeah, I got it, swim. Yippee!
So with his hearing damage, Sully just can't go back to the wild. And how lucky is he that all the way from Curacao, he made it to SeaWorld in San Diego, probably the best place in the world for him, and he's going to be taken care of for the rest of his life, and get rub-downs.
One day, Sully will probably perform at SeaWorld, and anyone will be able to go and meet him.
That's a big smile.
Sully owes his life to the people who vowed to save him, the staff of SeaWorld San Diego and the Curacao Sea Aquarium. To these people, this isn't just some stranded whale. He's Sully, the determined pilot whale who, like his namesake, refused to give up, even in the face of overwhelming odds.
Fish never need to take a bath because they live in water, but they do need to get clean. Instead of using soap, they rely on the assistance of another animal.
It may come as a surprise that fish even need to be cleaned, but fish get cuts and scrapes in the course of everyday life. The cuts get infected and itchy. Parasites sometimes irritate their skin too. So even a fish needs a little skin care. That means a trip to a cleaning station. This is a place on the reef where one kind of animal cleans another. Cleaners are usually small fish or shrimp. Larger fish come in to get cleaned and wait for the attention of the cleaners. Sometimes fish even open their sensitive gills to the cleaners. Like a beauty parlor downtown, the cleaning station is a popular place. It keeps the cleaners busy from dawn to dusk with a steady supply of customers. When the cleaning station gets busy, customers have to line up and wait. Sometimes service can be downright slow. But patience pays off. This grouper's finally getting its gills cleaned. Cleaners are so important that even top predators like barracudas won't eat them, but line up and wait for service. This is mutualistic symbiosis at its best. Not only do the larger fish get cleaned, but the cleaners get a meal. They eat the parasites and dead skin from the fish they clean. And it's an unspoken rule. Nobody eats the cleaner fish. On the Great Barrier Reef of Australia, there lives a rather large fish called a potato grouper. You can probably see the resemblance. And they're big. This one is off to the cleaning station, where a cleaner wrasse picks its nose. Talk about service. But the grouper doesn't really want me to watch. A moray eel doesn't like to leave her den during the day, so a pair of cleaner fish come to her. But but sometimes the plucking of parasites hurts a little. Anemone fish don't dare leave the protection of their anemone to get cleaned by cleaner fish. And since the cleaner fish would be stung and killed by the anemone, they can't go to the anemone fish. What to do? In this case, a cleaner shrimp lives in the anemone with the fish, ready to spring into action whenever a fish needs cleaning. It's not a life without difficulty, however.
But fish are not the only animals to get cleaned. Sea turtles, manta rays, and even sharks line up for the services of cleaners.
On a reef in the Philippines, a thresher shark with a tail as long as its body comes in from the open ocean to circle around its favorite cleaning station. Every morning, the sharks come here early for their cleaning. Tiny cleaner wrasses swarm around them for a few minutes. When the sharks are finished being cleaned, they leave the reef and swim back to the open sea. Nobody knows where the threshers go, but they'll be back to this very cleaning station tomorrow morning to be cleaned again. A few hundred miles away on a reef in Malaysia, a sea turtle is receiving the attention of a surgeonfish, which eats algae from her shell. Surgeonfish only eat plants, and the algae on this turtle's shell makes a delicious meal. And since all that algae can slow a turtle down, the fish is doing the turtle a favor by removing it. Everyone gets something out of this deal. When the tide is running at just the right speed in Yap, manta rays glide up to a coral head and hover in the current like a runner on a treadmill. This allows them to maintain a spot right over the cleaning station so they can enjoy the benefits of cleaners as well. The cleaners go right in and out of their gills, cleaning off parasites like copepods.
But of course, the real question is, can I go to a cleaning station?
I don't look like a fish, but it's worth a try. I find a nice anemone on the island of Bonaire with a cleaner shrimp looking bored with no customers. Maybe my hand will look like a really pathetic fish. It doesn't take long for this cleaner shrimp to get right down to business picking over my hand. It's looking for dead skin and parasites. I hope there are no parasites. It doesn't hurt, but it does tickle. As it turns out, humans can get a cleaning at the cleaning station, but only if there are no fish around wanting cleaning. So if I ever decide to live in the ocean permanently, I'll never need soap again.